The bloodiest day in American history wasn't D-Day. It was Antietam, and most Americans have never heard of it. On September 17, 1862, 2 days after the Battle of Antietam, President Abraham Lincoln stood on the shores of a Maryland creek and delivered his most famous address. The Gettysburg Address is one of the most famous speeches in American history. That's nearly double the casualties suffered by both sides at Gettysburg. In fact, Antietam is the single deadliest day in American military history. First of all, the battle was a tactical draw. So while it was a great moral victory for the Union, it didn't result in the kind of decisive win that we might want to commemorate with a holiday. Also, the nation was still reeling from the devastation of the Civil War, but perhaps we should all take a moment to remember the thousands of Americans who died at Antietam and the even greater number who died at other battles of the Civil War. After all, it is only by remembering the sacrifices of those who came before us that we can ensure that such sacrifices were not in vain. And in the end, it was Lincoln's masterful politics that ensured that the holiday would go to Gettysburg. But what most people don't realize is that the events at Antietam were far bloodier than those at Gettysburg. At Antietam, over 23,000 soldiers were killed or wounded, with almost 7,000 of them being Union soldiers. He invited Congress to dedicate a portion of the battlefield as a national cemetery and invited the nation to observe a day of mourning. But he also took the opportunity to argue for the preservation of the Union and the principles of liberty and equality. So why don't we celebrate it with a national holiday? Well, there are a few reasons. The battle involved 3 separate engagements and resulted in a confusing array of casualties. Plus, the politics were messy. While Lincoln wanted to use the occasion of a national cemetery to further his political goals, the dedication of the soldiers' national cemetery at Antietam was handled by local officials. And while the president's speech was well received, it wasn't exactly a rousing call to action like the Gettysburg Address. You see, Lincoln wanted to use the occasion of a national cemetery to further his political goals. In contrast, Antietam was a much more complicated affair. In the end, only one state, Maryland, observed the anniversary of Antietam as a holiday. I'm your host. Thank you for watching this video.